Robert F. Williams and a group of black World War II soldiers waited. The Klan had terrorized this neighborhood for months, but tonight, black men would shoot back. Monroe, North Carolina, sat 30 miles southeast of Charlotte, a small textile town of 12,000 people where cotton mills provided jobs and Jim Crow provided the rules. The railroad tracks divided white from black, prosperity from poverty, safety from terror. On one side lived the people who ran the town. On the other lived the people who kept it running, cooking in white kitchens, cleaning white homes, working white-owned factories for a fraction of white wages. Robert Franklin Williams arrived back in Monroe in 1955, though calling it an arrival suggests he'd been welcome somewhere else. Born in this town on February 26, 1925, he'd grown up hearing stories from his grandmother, a former slave who'd given him his grandfather's rifle and told him what it meant to survive in a place that wanted you dead. His grandfather had been a Republican organizer during Reconstruction, publishing a newspaper called The People's Voice until white violence made him choose between his voice and his life. He chose life, but kept the rifle. Williams knew Monroe's particular brand of hatred intimately. When he was 11 years old, he'd watched police officer Jesse Helms Sr., father of the future senator, drag a black woman bleeding through the streets by her hair after administering what the officer called an arrest. The woman's screams echoed in Williams' head for years. The sight of that badge glinting in the sun, while white onlookers smiled and nodded, taught young Robert a lesson that no school would ever address. The law in Monroe wasn't there to protect him. It was there to remind him of his place. He'd tried to escape that place. During World War II, Williams migrated north like hundreds of thousands of other black Southerners, finding work in Detroit's auto factories. He was there in 1943 when white mobs stormed through black neighborhoods, killing dozens. He fought back then, young and angry, learning that Northern freedom was just Southern oppression with better lighting. In 1944, he was drafted into the Army, serving until 1946. Then he joined the Marines, 1954 to 1955, where he learned discipline, marksmanship, and the bitter irony of defending a country that wouldn't defend him. When he returned to Monroe in 1955, he found the local National Association for the Advancement of Colored People chapter gasping its last breath. 6 members remained, from what had once been a thriving organization. The others had been fired from jobs, threatened, beaten, driven out. Southern states were systematically destroying the NAACP, branding it communist, outlawing it where they could. In Monroe, simply attending a meeting could cost you everything. Williams started recruiting, not from the middle-class teachers and preachers who typically led NAACP chapters. He went to the factories, the farms, the unemployed men standing on corners. Most importantly, he went to the veterans, men who'd seen combat, who'd been trained to fight, who'd tasted just enough equality in uniform to make segregation unbearable when they came home. Men like Dr. Albert Perry. Dr. Albert E. Perry was everything Monroe's white establishment wanted to deny could exist. A black man with a medical degree, a veteran, a practicing physician at the local hospital. He bought a nice brick house, drove a decent car, and had the audacity to act like he deserved respect. Williams made him vice president of the Monroe NAACP. Together, they set about picking fights the previous leadership would never have dared to start. Their first victory came quiet. In 1956, they integrated the public library. White Monroe barely noticed because white Monroe barely used the library, but Williams and Perry noticed. They'd proven that pressure worked, that the system could be moved, so they picked a target that mattered more: the swimming pool. In the summer of 1957, 2 black children drowned in a creek. There was nowhere else for them to swim. Monroe's public pool, built with federal tax dollars that black families paid just like white families, was reserved exclusively for white residents. Black children had to make do with unsupervised creeks, muddy rivers, and the consequences that came with them. 2 children went under and didn't come up. Their names were lost to history, but their deaths sparked something that wouldn't be forgotten. Williams went to the city council with a reasonable request. Open the pool to black children 1 day a week, just 1 day. The council's response was a masterclass in creative racism. Draining and refilling the pool after black people used it, they explained with straight faces, would simply be too expensive. Segregation, they suggested, was an economic necessity. Williams had a different analysis. Standing before the council, he delivered a line that cut through Monroe's polite racism like a blade. Segregation, he said, is a luxury that Monroe cannot afford. He organized picket lines. 8 people at first, standing at the pool gates, silent, peaceful, exactly the kind of protest that Martin Luther King Jr. was preaching across the South. And Monroe responded the way Monroe always responded, with violence. Shots rang out at the picket lines. No one was arrested. Law enforcement officers stood by and watched. The message was clear. You can protest all you want, but when the bullets fly, you're on your own. That's when the Ku Klux Klan got involved. The Klan in Monroe wasn't some fringe element hiding in the shadows. In a town of 12,000 people, the press estimated 7,500 Klan members and supporters, more than half the town. They held massive rallies where thousands gathered in their robes and hoods, listening to speakers promise to keep Monroe pure, to keep the races separate, to handle these uppity agitators who thought they deserved to swim in white water. Leading these rallies was James William Catfish Cole, a South Carolina Klan organizer who'd made Monroe his personal project. Cole was the Klan's regional heavyweight, a man who commanded respect in white supremacist circles, someone who got things done. He held rallies where he specifically named Williams and Perry, calling them communists, troublemakers, threats to the Southern way of life. Then his followers would pile into their cars and form motorcades. Here's where the institutional betrayal became impossible to ignore. Monroe's police chief, A.A. Morney, didn't try to stop these motorcades. He led them. Squad cars with flashing lights would escort 50, sometimes more, Klan vehicles through Monroe's streets. The procession would wind through town, then head across the railroad tracks into Newtown, the black section, and there they'd drive past specific houses, firing guns into windows, throwing bottles, shouting threats, while the police chief made sure they had safe passage. Dr. Perry's house became a favorite target. Night after night, the motorcade would roll past, and gunfire would erupt. Perry, his wife, his children, huddling inside while bullets punched through walls. He'd call the police. They'd tell him they couldn't confirm any shooting had occurred, despite the holes in his house and the shell casings in his yard. Then they'd suggest perhaps he'd be safer if he stopped causing trouble. Williams made a decision that would define his life and split the civil rights movement. If the law wouldn't protect black people would protect themselves. He applied for a charter from the National Rifle Association. The NRA approved it without hesitation. Williams formed what he called the Black Armed Guard, though officially it was the Monroe chapter of the NRA. 50 to 60 men, most of them veterans like Williams, men who knew how to handle weapons, how to maintain discipline under fire, how to return fire effectively. They trained, they drilled, they bought guns with money raised from supporters, including fundraisers in Harlem, where Malcolm X would later invite Williams to speak at his mosque. They studied tactics, and they prepared Dr. Perry's house like it was a forward operating base. By October 1957, tensions in Monroe had reached a breaking point. The Klan's motorcades continued, increasingly brazen. White Monroe had circulated petitions to have Williams and Perry driven from town. Anonymous death threats arrived daily. Williams' insurance company cancelled his coverage, citing the risk. When he asked the police chief why his insurance was cancelled if there was no danger, the chief had no answer. On October 5, 1957, the Klan decided to make their point permanent. They were going to Dr. Perry's house, and this time they weren't just going to shoot at it. They were going to burn it down with everyone inside. Williams got word through the black community's network. People who worked in white homes, who overheard conversations, who understood that information meant survival. The Klan was coming, in force. Tonight. Williams and his men moved into Perry's house that afternoon. They stacked sandbags along the windows. They positioned men with clear fields of fire. They made sure everyone understood the plan. No one fires first, but when they do fire, we fire back. Aim low. Disable. Don't kill if possible. Make it clear we're serious without giving them martyrs. As the sun set, they waited. Perry's family had been moved to safety. Inside the house were only men who'd made peace with what might happen next. Veterans who'd survived war only to find themselves at war in their own hometown. Men who'd sworn oaths to defend their country and were now defending their community from their neighbors. The sound reached them first. Engines. Lots of engines. Then the glow of headlights. Dozens of them, winding through Monroe's streets. The motorcade rolled past City Hall, past the courthouse, past the nice white neighborhoods where people watched from their porches like it was a parade. Then it crossed the tracks into Newtown. 50 cars or more,